Hey everybody, welcome back to Young Engineers of Today. And I hope you are ready to learn more about Unity, because that's what we're going to continue with today. We are going to add a few more things. Well, we're going to continue with the prizes, and then we're going to start working on the user interface. So let's just spend a couple of minutes reviewing what we did on Monday, and I'm going to go ahead and open up Unity. Fall 2015, 8 p.m. There we go. That's us. Okay, so we created the camera follow function, or the camera follow script rather, where we had the player object, which holds the ball, and we had the offset variable, which holds the distance from the camera to the ball. And then we just had a start function where the offset was created, which is the distance from the camera to the ball. If we go back to look at it, there it is right there. And so it sets up immediately at the beginning that is where the camera is supposed to be relative to the ball. And then we had the late update function where it changes its position based on the position of the ball plus an offset. So that's the and if you remember, the late update happens after update. It runs once per game tick, but it happens after update, just so we can ensure that the ball is in its final position for that game tick, so the camera moves to the correct spot, so you don't have any weirdness with the camera. It ends up moving with the ball, just all that stuff. So we did that. And then we added some cubes into the game too. We spent some time talking about prefabs. Excuse me, I had a hard time remembering what it was. Prefabs. We... -5, okay. So if you remember, prefabs are kind of like classes in programming, where you have a blueprint, in this case the prize prefab, and then you can create copies of it that have the same exact properties. So if you remember, we added that cube rotate function to the original prize, so it causes the cube to rotate in this given direction, 15 degrees along the x-axis, and 30 degrees along the y-axis, and 45 degrees along the z-axis, times the change in time since the last time a game tick elapsed. So it rotates, around all of its axes. And we added that function to the original prize prefab, and then we created a bunch of copies of it, a bunch of instances of it, which all have A, that cube rotate function, and B, also all the same properties. So, they all have the same scale, they all have the same rotation. They have different positions because we moved them around individually, so as you can see, they're all in different positions, but they all have the same scale and they all have the same starting rotation. And if we run the program real quick, you can see that all of them are rotating just like what's expected. So, first things first, let's actually create a couple more prizes. In fact, let's create 2 more so we have 6 total. And you can just do that by selecting the prize right here, hitting Control-C, and then Control-V, and you add a couple more. Nice and easy. And so with those selected, we can actually drag them out so that we have a whole bunch of prizes in different locations. Let's move this one up or forward and over to the left, and we'll move this one back and over to the right, further over to the right. You don't have to do this exactly, I'm just spacing them out so that they are further apart. And if we hit play, we can see that despite the fact that we just added 2 more, they still have the same properties. They still rotate, just like, we expect the cubes to. They still have the same scale, the same size, and they still have the same starting rotation. So, what else can we do with prefabs? I mean, so far we've shown that we can create prefabs and they have the same properties as the blueprint, right? Which is cool and all, but what if we wanted to change everything about all of them? Well, let's do this first. What I want to do is I want to create a game object that's going to hold all of these prizes so that basically we just have less clutter over here in the hierarchy on the left-hand side. As you can see, we got prize and then prize 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which is all just kind of a mess over there. Let's see if we can't get that fixed. So if we go up to game object and then create empty, oh, look at that, there's a new empty game object down here. We can hit F2 to rename it and then call it prizes. I believe if you hit enter, if you're using a Mac, that should do the same thing. It's been a while since I've tried to rename anything in a Mac. And then you can just drag the prizes into there. So prize, and then prize 1, and then prize 2, and prize 3, and prize 4, and prize 5. And then we'll just put prize 2 here so it's nice and organized. And boom, there we go. Now we can minimize it by using this triangle over on the side, so we can either see all of them if we need to, or we can just make it go away, and so we know that the prizes are here. Just like what we did with the walls last time around too. Remember, we got east, west, north, and south wall, and they're all a part of walls. Also, if I just click on this prizes object in the hierarchy, all of them get selected, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's not amazingly cool, but it's handy. Better word would probably be handy. So now we've got all of them. So now what? Let's do something to change the properties of all of these prizes. Something that would be easy to see. Let's add a new material. So over here in the Project Explorer, we can go over here to Materials on the far left-hand side near the bottom. And as you can see, we've already got one material in here, which is our background, which is the floor material that we have. But let's go ahead and create a new one. So either you can click Create over here, or you can right-click inside of the Explorer and just highlight Create, and it should bring up a new thing, and then you can just select Material and left-click, and there we go, new material. And we're going to call it Prize Material. Or Prize Color. Let's call it Prize Color. Prize Color is easier to type. So now we got Prize Color. It's fairly basic looking white material, just like what the prizes are covered in. So if we, try to drag it onto one of the prizes, that prize would just look exactly the same. So let's give it a color. I'm gonna pick like some kind of a red color. You can pick whatever color you'd like, but this is just the one that I'm going to go with. So there we go, we got like a nice deep red color. So now what I can do is I can just drag it onto here. Well, but there's an issue. If I drag it onto one of these prizes, you'll notice it just changes one of them, which is not really ideal. Like if we had 30 of these prizes, it would be a pain to do that, right? There we go. Bring it back to white. So, how do we fix that? Well, let me tell you. So now that we've selected our color, let's go over here, Prefabs, in the Assets. Click on that. Here's our prize prefab, just like it was before. Go ahead and click on that so it comes up in the inspector over here on the right-hand side. I'm going to click back on the Materials window so that prize color comes back up. And then I'm just going to go ahead and drag it over here into the prize inspector, the prize prefab inspector. So as you can see, the cursor gets that plus sign again, and if we just let go, what it's going to do is it's going to update the prize prefab so that it has that red color, which of course is going to update the colors of all the prizes. Boom. Nice and easy. All of them get updated. Pretty handy. So if we hit play, now they're all rotating nicely, now they're all scaled nicely, and now they're all that nice red color, because few things more American than red, white, and blue. I guess French in this case too. Anyway, now we can reactivate our sphere if we go over here and click on sphere in the hierarchy. Remember, it was grayed out. If we click on sphere in the hierarchy and then click the checkbox over here in the inspector, right next to the word sphere, so that it is selected again, it is now reactive, and if we play the game, now we can move the sphere around and bump into these cubes to our heart's content. But that's not really that, exciting, right? Like, we kind of want it to do something. Like, maybe give us points when the prizes are touched, or at least just give us some sort of feedback other than it just kind of goes bump, and we have to go around it. That would work for an obstacle, but we're not trying to create an obstacle. We're trying to create points. So there is something in the scripts that we can add in order for that to start happening. Now this is a bit tricky because if you were just to think, what kind of scripting would we add? Where would we add it? Maybe off the top of your head you would think to add it to the prizes, right? But in reality, what we're actually going to do is we're going to add some scripting to the, to the ball. So let's go ahead and let's open up our player move script. And it's open now in MonoDevelop. And it'll just be a moment while I pull back up the information I have here. Oh, this is we need lesson. All right, so bring back up lesson 3. So yeah, we're not going to add a new script. We're actually going to put this into the player move script. And it's going to be a new function. Don't worry, I'm going to put the code into the chat box just so you guys know exactly what's going on. I know it can be hard to read on my screen. But basically, we're going to add a new function underneath update. And it's going to be called onTriggerEnter. Now, onTriggerEnter is just simply, it's code speak for when the ball touches another object. That's really all it means. There are triggers which we can add to other objects so that when we, tap them in Unity or whatever, it's registered as entering a trigger. You can add triggers to like anything. You can have like invisible walls with triggers. You can have invisible walls that you can walk through that are triggers. So basically just like checkpoints. So you can get like the autosave thing that you see in some video games where you walk through something and it's like, oh, now saving your game. So that's what triggers can do. Triggers can do all kinds of things. We're going to have onTriggerEnter, and it's a function, so we need to have those parentheses. However, we're going to put something inside of those parentheses right now. We're going to put in a variable called other, and we're going to tell it that other is of type collider. So now, anytime anything else in Unity calls for the onTriggerEnter function in our player move, like for instance when they touch something that has a trigger, this function will be called in our ball, and a collider will be passed into it of type other. Now, a collider is just simply a thing that sort of renders an object solid. Like our ball has a sphere collider, all of these prizes, they're going to have box colliders, the walls are going to have box colliders. Basically, it makes an object solid so things don't go through it, and it registers a collision. Hence, collider. So what we're looking for is something of type collider. Now we have an if statement. The if statement should be pretty familiar to you guys from Code Combat. If the statement inside the parentheses is true, then run. So what we're going to do is if other dot GameObject dot tag equals pickup. So what that's saying here is you'll notice that these colliders that we have, like the wall collider, or the box collider, excuse me, is a part of a wall game object. It is a component of a wall game object. So we're saying if the game object that this collider is attached to has a tag that is pickup, and we'll go into tags sort of in a few minutes here. I just want to say that that's what that's saying. Then do the stuff in here. So like if the ball bumps into something, it's gonna register that hit with the collider, and then it's gonna go, okay, hey, so the thing that you're attached to, that game object that you're a component of, does it have this tag? So that's all we're saying here. If the game object tag is pickup, and it is exactly this, no space with a capital P and a capital U, then we're going to write something out to the debug log, and then we are going to other.gameObject.setActive false. So these two lines, all they do is they print something out to the console over here. That's what debug.log means, or console.log, excuse me, it should be debug.log. So debug.log prints out to this console over here. And then again, we reference the game object that our collider is attached to. Remember, other is of type collider. We reference the game object that other is attached to. And then we set its active state to false. So what exactly does that mean? Well, remember when we made the sphere disappear by clicking the checkbox over here? That's exactly what that checkbox is doing, is it's setting its active state to false. It's just making it disappear from the world. That's all that's doing. So when we touch one of these cubes, it's going to just click that checkbox for us automatically. And then that cube will disappear. So again, so you can double check your code. So it kind of looks intimidating, that code right there. There's a lot of periods and there's a lot of things going on. But in reality, it's actually not too bad. We're just accessing, we're kind of like, essentially what's happening here is, imagine there's a whole bunch of people walking around inside of like a convention center or something like that. And you're walking around and you bump into a person. That person can be thought of as the collider. You guys just like kind of hit each other and you're like, oh, whoa, okay, hi. The game object they're a part of can be thought of like, the country they're a part of or the city they're from or something like that. It's the larger collection of things that they are a part of. So in this sense, it's kind of, this on-trigger enter is kind of like you're walking around the convention center and you bump into somebody. And you go, oh, hey. And they go, oh, hey. And you go, where did you grow up? And they go, oh, I grew up in Charlotte. There's your gameObject.tag. That's the tag of the larger, of the thing that they're a part of, the name of the city that they come from. And then the analogy becomes strange here. You say boom, and then Charlotte disappears. So it's not a perfect analogy, but the idea is there. So anyway, let's go ahead and build this code. Debug.log is not a member. Oh, it's a capital L. I apologize, everybody. Log is a capital L. So, to double check that, there you go. Log should be a capital L in debug.log. So there, now our code is built. Perfect. Let's build it one more time, just to be sure. Build successful. Let's go ahead and run it. Hey, oh, oh, well, looks like there are a few more things we have to do. Because nothing's happening. We're still just bumping into them. Exactly the same things going on. Well, that's because there is a second part to this. Unity and MonoDevelop, or Unity and your IDE of choice, work hand in hand. Some of the things that you can do, you can only do through scripting. Some of the things that you can do, you can only do through the Unity editor. Some of them you can do through both. And oftentimes, the best way to make a game in Unity is to learn what things need to be done in Unity and what things need to be done with scripting. So in this case, we've done the scripting part of it. We've told the ball what's going to happen every time we touch one of these cubes. Now, we have to change the properties of the cube in the Unity editor so that they do what they're supposed to. Namely, they have a trigger. Because right now they don't have a trigger. This onTrigger enter that we have in our script means nothing, because these cubes don't have a trigger. Much less a tag. They don't have a tag either. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over into the project view, Prefabs, and select our prize. Now let's see what we got. Excuse me. Well, okay. First things first, let's add a tag. It's really only first because it's at the top, but, you know, working from top to bottom is pretty reasonable too, wouldn't you say? Anyway. So, right underneath the prize name at the top, there is this drop-down menu labeled tag. And right now, the option selected is untagged. So we're going to change that. Click on it. You should see like respawn, finish, editor only, main camera, player, game controller. And then there's the last one, add tag. That's what we're going to select, because we're going to add a new tag to it. Because really, none of those really apply to what we want to do, what we're looking for. What we want is a power-up or a pickup. So we need the pickup tag, which is going to be distinct from all those other ones. So we need to add one of our own. You should see this tags and layers menu appear in the inspector. Just go ahead and click the plus sign. And it'll say tag 0, and then there's this little text box that you can change. Whoops. Go ahead and type in pickup in there, just like you did in MonoDevelop. And hit enter. Boom. Now if we click on prize again in the project viewer, we can go back to that tag list and select pickup from it, because that's now part of the list. And look at that. Now we've added the pickup tag to the prize game object, the prefab. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to come down to our box collider, which should be like the third one down. Transform, cube, mesh filter, and then box collider. There's a checkbox that says is trigger. Well, as one might imagine, if we want to make it so onTrigger enter occurs whenever we touch a box, we should probably make it a trigger. So just check that box. So now it's a trigger. Which means that when we touch it, it's going to call the onTrigger enter function in the ball. It's going to check and make sure it collided with a box collider, or just a collider of some type, in this case a box collider. And then it's going to say if that game object it's attached to has a tag of pickup, which now it does, it should execute this code in here. But we're going to do one more thing just for, you know, cleanliness' sake, I suppose. I don't know. We're going to go down to add component down here and click on it. I'm going to add a physics component. It's going to be a rigid body. So just like what you have with the ball, we're going to add a rigid body. Except in this case, we're not doing it so that we can apply physics to the cubes. We're going to do something a little bit different. You've got two checkboxes here, use gravity and is kinematic. You can uncheck use gravity and check is kinematic. So what that's done, well, you'll see what that's done. Let's hit play. There are cubes floating there. Let's just go ahead and lazily drift to the left. Boom, look at that. The cube disappeared. I also started to go through it before it disappeared. Kinematic makes it so that it's possible to just sort of float through something. It's not affected by physics. There is no solidity to the object. So if we were to go to the right really slowly as we get closer and closer to this, we should notice that, and it disappears. And if we check the console, look at that. We've got two printouts to the console. They both say boom. So that's exactly what we told the code to do. We told it to print out boom to the console and to set it to inactive. So it looks like we're picking them up. When in reality, all we're doing is as soon as we touch them, we're getting some sort of feedback from the game, and we're making them disappear, which is also technically another form of feedback. But regardless, the fact that they disappear kind of gives the illusion that they're being picked up. This is oftentimes what happens in a lot of games that you see. Like, it's just like, oh, we're going to pick it up. All you do is you just make it invisible, or you disable it from the game world, and then you place it into the player's inventory, and boom, it's exactly like they picked it up. So there we go. Now we have a game where you can run around and grab all of the prizes. Easy peasy, just like that. Not too bad, right? Do you guys have any questions about what we've done so far? So now we've got a ball that moves, a camera that follows the ball, walls to keep the ball in, unless you decide to fly away by holding down the spacebar, prizes that you can pick up. They disappear when you touch them, and something's written out the console. Now, we should probably keep track of points, right? And I can't remember. It was this class, right? Did one of you ask how it would be possible to rotate the camera around the ball? Maybe. It might be somebody who's not here right now. Anyway. So, let's go ahead and get started on adding a score. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to bring up the next. So basically the goal of this is to keep track of the score of the game and to display that score to the player. Once they reach a certain score, we're going to let them know that they won. Cool. So this is where things get a little wacky, but it'll all make sense in due time. So stick with it. What we're going to do is we're going to insert a user interface, that's what UI is short for, as I'm sure you guys already know, user interface text object. Go up here to game object, and then UI, and then text. Show that for a minute, and then click on that, and then you'll notice you'll have like a rectangle appear somewhere, but you might see it from this angle, you might see it from the opposite angle, you might see it from like this side, so all you see is a line. Who knows? Regardless, you're probably only seeing a part of a rectangle. So what happens if I double click on canvas? Wow, look at that. Look at this whole big rectangle. And if you look down into the corner, the lower left-hand corner, you can see a teeny tiny playing field. That's the playing field we've been working with. So this doesn't really seem useful, right? This whole big giant thing, and then we got the text in the middle, and now we got this little teeny tiny canvas, or little teeny tiny playing field down here. That's actually okay, because here's the weird thing. What Unity does is it superimposes this over what we're looking at, over the camera. So if we were to hit play, right now, it's really hard to see, but there's new text here in the middle of the screen, like just kind of superimposed over the ball. Just a little bit. If we move it over, yeah, over to the wall so that the wall is covering it, it's easier to see. But there you go, new text. So as you can see, it doesn't really matter that it's way far away on this big giant rectangle. This whole thing is what gets superimposed on top of Unity, on top of your camera. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the text element and we're just going to move it to the upper left-hand corner of the canvas. Just like that. Boom. So now we got new text up here, and if we hit the play button again, as you can see, the new text is sitting over here in the upper left-hand corner. So unplay. Go ahead and select your text element. We're going to give it a little larger font size, so we're going to give it a font size of 20 instead of 14. And the color we're going to change from like that black color to a white color. And that's just so it stands out against the dark gray background. As you can see, it's a lot easier to see now. So now we've got new text, it's larger, and it pops against the background right there. You can change you can change the font and stuff if you want to. I don't know how many options there are. There aren't really many. But just make sure that it's readable. That's really the most important thing, is make sure that it's readable. Once you've set it up with these parameters, so the font size of 20 and the color, the light color, you can just go ahead and delete the new text in here and click away from it. So now it looks invisible, but the text element is still there. There's just no text in it. So if we were to hit play, you wouldn't see any text over there. That's okay. The text element is still there. It's just not filled with any text. I tend to repeat myself, I know. So using the yellow red arrows, we're only using the Y and the X arrows. Don't use the Z arrow. Put your text up in the upper left corner. Give your text the following attributes. We're going to put this scorekeeping script into player move script. And then we're just going to add a few more things. So as you can see, the code in player move is getting incrementally more complex, which is kind of cool. I mean, this is mostly how games are built, is just adding layers of complexity to things. Not necessarily complication, or not necessarily complicated stuff, but greater complexity. There's a difference. Complicated is bad. Complicated's hard to read. Complicated's hard to follow. Complex is deep, detailed, and there's a lot going on to it. But complicated has a different connotation. What we're going for is complex, not complicated. So we're going to create a private variable, and we're going to call it count, and we're going to set it equal to 0. Notice how we don't have to set anything. Like with move horizontal, we cast it to a float. Move vertical, we cast it to a float. Other, we cast to a collider. Count, we don't cast anything. Nothing at all. We just say count is equal to 0, because JavaScript is smart enough to be able to figure out that it's supposed to be an integer. And then we're going to add a start function. So you remember all those functions I had you delete in the beginning? When we first created this player move class, yeah, they were a start and an update function. I just wanted to have you guys add them in manually so you can understand what was going on. So you remember the start function from camera follow was where we implemented the offset. So the offset was equal to the transform or the camera's position in space. We're not going to do that here. We're going to do something called set count text. What? What is that? Well, as you can tell from the parentheses, this is probably a function call, right? Or this is a function that we're referring to. So set count text is a function. So you remember from Code Combat how it was like, get enemy name, and then we got the enemy name, and we could tell it was a function call because it had the parentheses. That's exactly what's going on here. Is we're calling a function to run it. It's the same thing that's going on here with getAxis. It's the same thing that's going on here with debuglog. It's the same thing that's going on here with setActive. We're calling a function, another bit of code somewhere else, to run that code and then come back to where we were. Difference is, you'll notice that in all of these, like, there's an input dot in front of it. This one has a rigid body in front of it, or a get component in front of that. This one has game object dot in front of it. This one has debug dot in front of it. This one doesn't have anything. It's not like, you know, player dot set count text or anything like that. That's not there. That means, in essence, that this set count text is going to exist inside of this class, because it's not hiding anywhere else. We don't have to tell it where to find it. If we don't tell it where to find it, it's going to assume that it's inside of the same class. And we're going to oblige it. Oblige it, whatever. By creating a function called, you guessed it, setCountText. So now, what setCountText is going to do, let me make sure, yeah, we need to add that in later. Okay. So what setCountText does is just this one line, countText dot, nope, dot text is equal to count, and then a space, plus count. Yeah, that's what I thought. Now we're using the word count a lot. Oh, no, not count, but score. So as you might imagine, count is going to be our score for the player. So as they grab another cube, it's going to increase their score by 1. CountText.text, well, that's going to be the text UI element up here. So what we're saying is set the text inside of that text UI element to be score, the word score, a colon, a space, and then whatever is contained within the word count. So if count is equal to 0, this is the same thing as putting a 0 in here. If count is equal to 1, it's the same thing as putting a 1 in here. This concept has a fancy name. It's called concatenation. But basically all it means is just taking two things and then sticking them together. We have an issue though. Apologies for clearing my throat. Unity doesn't yet know, MonoDevelop doesn't yet know, this code doesn't yet know what the heck count text is. So we need to set up a variable. To hold it, and let's just make sure, yep, okay. So what we've done is we've created a variable called countText, because that's what this is. This is a countText a variable right here. It's a countText variable, much like the player variable is here in camera follow. We've created a variable called countText of type UI.text. So we know it's the text component of the UI. And we've made that public. So in essence, well, let's not do that yet. There's one more thing we have to do. What do you think it is? I mean, in the code right now, there's one more thing we have to do. Any ideas? How is our score changing right now? Okay, well, I'll tell you, it's not. We gotta make it so that the score goes up whenever the player touches one of the prizes. So we can do that by adding a line of code to our on-trigger enter. Oh, I will in a moment. I just wanted to get through this first before I sent the code out. Yeah. We'll get there, no worries. Just with that line right there, count plus plus. That's shorthand in like a bazillion programming languages to just add one to count. So this is what our player move script looks like so far. We've added a few more things to it. We've added another function. Well, technically we've added two functions, but one of them is a custom function. So, you know, good work. You guys have created a custom function. It doesn't do much. All it does is it writes these particular characters to the text element in the user interface. So it'll just say score and then 0 or whatever. That's all set count text does. But look at that. Oh, there's one more thing we have to do. Apologies. That is the correct player move script. Because we have to call set count text every time the game updates. So once you've done that, go ahead and build it. No errors, 6 warnings, as per usual. We go over here to Unity. Let's minimize prizes. Let's click on Sphere. So now you'll notice in Sphere, the player move script now has a new little box here called count text, and it says none, and then in parentheses text. Well, we're going to take our handy little text UI element from over here on the hierarchy, drag it over into here, so now count text should be filled with text, and then in parentheses text. And then click play. Look at that. Now it says score 0. What happens if you touch a ball or a cube? Score 1, score 2, score 3, score 4, score 5, score 6. Oh my god, it automatically updates. Pretty cool, right? It was a pretty simple thing. It's just a few things all kind of talking to each other, and it's the way they all talk to each other that makes it feel a lot more cohesive, right? So we're taking count, which is technically score. You could call it score if it makes it easier for you to keep track of. And we're just writing it constantly to that text UI element that we created. Anytime, as you can see, we got a set count text called here in update and one in start. And anytime the ball touches a prize, we increment count by 1 using count plus plus. Like I said, just a shorthand for you could type it out the long way, but it's kind of annoying. Count equals count plus 1. That's doing the same thing. But that's a lot more typing than just count plus plus. So there you go. Rebuild it, even though we don't really need to. Alright, well, it is 8:54. So we got a little bit done today. We got a scoreboard up and running. We don't really have a win condition yet, but we have a scoreboard up and running. We've got some colored prizes now. We can update all of those prizes with the prefab. The ball moves around, the camera follows the ball. we've got the beginnings of a game. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're almost there. We need a win condition. We need a lose condition. But we're getting there. So with that in mind, I'm going to throw out the poll questions. Once those are done, again, if you guys have any questions about anything we've gone over so far, let me know. Be happy to go over it with you again. Otherwise, head on out. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.